Have you ever stopped to think about a word as simple as this? It seems so basic, right? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive into some of the most fundamental words in any language, the ones we use to point. We'll be looking at Spanish, but what we uncover is actually something universal about how we all communicate. When you really get down to it, language is all about sharing what's in our heads with other people. And one of the most direct ways we do that is by pointing, not just with our finger, but with our words. It's how we get on the same page, literally focusing on the same thing in the world around us. It's almost laughably simple, isn't it? If I'm holding my phone, I say this phone. We probably do this 100 times a day and never, ever think about it. It's just instinct. And Spanish does the exact same thing, just with different sounds. For that same phone, a Spanish speaker would say, este teléfono. It's the same idea, pointing with a word. But here's where it starts to get really interesting. I mean, why is this simple act of verbal pointing just everywhere? It turns out these little words have a really special place, not just in Spanish grammar, but in the entire story of how human language came to be. So let's just zoom out for a second. These pointing words, which linguists call demonstratives, are so much more than just another list of vocabulary to memorize. They are a core pillar of language itself. So what makes them so special? Well, for one, it looks like they exist in pretty much every single human language. And unlike a lot of words, we can't really trace them back to other nouns or verbs. They seem to be ancient, just themselves. They're also some of the very first words babies learn. And get this, they often act as the seeds from which other parts of grammar grow, like articles and pronouns. They're like the starter dough of language. This quote really drives the point home. Linguists Evans and Levinson are basically saying that languages are so incredibly different from each other that finding anything they all have in common is a huge deal. And demonstratives, they seem to be one of those incredibly rare things. So when you're learning them in Spanish, you're tapping into something truly primal about communication. All right, so let's zoom back in and see how Spanish puts this universal idea into practice. In English, we mostly have two zones, right? Here and there. But Spanish kicks it up a notch with 3 distinct zones of distance. So first up, you've got the este family. Think of this as your personal bubble, things you can literally touch. Este libro is this book right here in my hands. Then there's the ese family. That's for things a little further away, maybe on the table across from you. Ese libro means that book. And finally, you have the aquél family, for stuff that's way off in the distance. Aquél libro, that book way over there. Now, each of these 3 families has 4 different forms. And you might be asking, why 4? Why make it so complicated? Well, it's because in Spanish, these pointing words have to play by the rules of grammar. Let's break down what that means. Okay, this is one of the absolute cornerstones of Spanish words. Words have to match the noun they're describing. Think of it like they have to show up wearing the same team jersey. So whenever a demonstrative is pointing to a specific noun, it's acting like an adjective. And that means it has to agree in 2 ways. With the noun's gender, is it masculine or feminine? And its number, is it singular or plural? Here's what that looks like in the wild. Toro, bull, is a masculine singular noun, so we use este. But oveja, sheep, is feminine and singular, so it has to be esta. See how it changes? Same thing for plurals. Multiple bulls, estos toros. Multiple sheep, estas ovejas. The pointing word literally changes its shape to match the noun. Now, here's a really important distinction you have to get. Sometimes these words describe a noun, but other times they replace it completely. And that changes their job title from a demonstrative adjective to a demonstrative pronoun. The only question you have to ask is the noun still there? In Me gusta este libro, the word este is an adjective. It's describing the libro. But if we drop the noun and just say Me gusta este, it means I like this one. Now, este is doing all the work by itself. It's a pronoun. See the difference? Here's a little trick to remember this. The demonstrative either has a noun right after it, or it's standing alone. For a long time, the rule was that when they were pronouns, they got a written accent mark, like este or estas. Now, the official grammar police say that accent is optional, but you'll still see it everywhere. And honestly, it's a great visual clue. If you see the accent, there's no noun.
Okay, so we've totally nailed pointing at things in physical space. But these words are so powerful that we also use them for more abstract kinds of pointing.
We do this in English all the time without even thinking about it, right? We talk about this week versus that week, using space words for time. Spanish does that too, and it can also point to ideas within a conversation. And here's a super useful pro tip. If you're comparing two things, este can mean the latter, the thing you just mentioned, and aquél can mean the former. So they don't just map out space, they map out time and ideas too. And that brings us to a final, pretty cool thought. These simple pointing words show us something deep about how our brains work. We are constantly using what we understand about physical space to organize abstract stuff. So the next time you say this or that, remember you're not just pointing. You're using an ancient, universal tool to draw a shared map of reality. It makes you wonder, what other parts of our lives are we mapping out without even knowing it?